Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. I'm all right. I'm surviving. How are you?
Good. I'm Catholic, and I'm not going to say that I know a lot about Islam, but I
Okay.
know a lot about church history. So I was interested because, growing up in America, you get a lot of this, I would call it Islamophobia, a lot of this stereotyping, a lot of stuff that I think is really unfair. And it makes me think like there must be something more to this. If so many people hate this group, there must be something that they're onto. And especially, of course, if you look at Christianity and Islam, we're really the only two contenders
Sure.
for worldwide, right? So and I also was interested when I studied church history that there were a lot of disputes between Christians and Muslims as sort of cousins or brothers, like you know what I mean, like that we recognize, or Catholics recognized, I think it was called Mohammedans, as like a heresy, not a different religion, like when we would talk to Hindus or Buddhists or something like that. And I think that's probably on both sides, that you would see us as having a lot of commonalities.
Yeah, I mean commonalities. Yeah, we wouldn't say a heresy, but we would say a commonality. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's probably a different language that you would use there.
Yeah.
But what I'm curious about is and it's hard to get this, when I've talked with a few Muslims. So that the church's tradition for Catholics is that we have a magisterium. We would say, and Protestants disagree, of course, that we have an interpreter who we could look to interpret, and with the bishops interpret the scriptures. And I understand, but Muslims don't have that. Is that correct? And have never had that? Like
Okay. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So the first thing is I like commenting a little bit on what you said before. The idea of that if so many people say something, then it must be true. No, it's just the fact that this is how brainwashing works. When all
Yeah.
the media repeats, all the media repeats the same lie, then the average Joe starts to think that there must be truth to this claim, because if every TV channel I open, every journal I'm reading is saying the same thing. But
Yeah.
what they don't know is that they're all run by the same people, and the same people
Yeah.
are telling them to say the same thing.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that, that if there is so many people saying something, therefore it makes it true. What makes something true
Right.
is the evidences when we look at them.
Mm.
Also, the idea of being the only two contenders. I'm not sure about how accurate this is. If you look at America today, for example, America today is run by a foreign country in the Middle East, essentially, right? You have
I
to
agree.
back
Yeah.
your lobby, right? So you want to talk
I
about who's
agree.
running what? Like, I may disagree with that a little bit. Okay, so what you're saying, an interpreter. Now to get to it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I do think that's a genuine weakness of Christianity, that it is subject to this sort of takeover. Muslims are stronger and have remained stronger. Whatever you want to say about the truth of the Quran or the Bible, I would have to look as a Westerner at Muslim nations and say they have protected the basic truths about the family and the structure of society in a way that we just have to say we have not been able to do. And so I do respect that tremendously. And even online, Muslims are genuinely far more polite and far more like normal seeming than Christians online, which may be just an online thing. But so I'm interested. So in this, yeah, like you guys are usually the opposite of the stereotype of what we're supposed to see as some guy with a scimitar. You know what I mean? Like, and well done, like good for you. But what I'm saying, my question is, so this thing of like, you don't have an interpreter of the Quran who's like, we would have the Pope and the bishops, and we have a certain thing, right?
Sure.
You don't have that, and you have a split from early on between Shia and Sunni.
No.
No,
that's not the case. We do have an interpreter of the Quran, and that interpreter of the Quran is the Prophet. So Allah tells us in the Quran explicitly in multiple places. So we have 6 ways, you can say around 5 or 6 ways to explain the Quran. This has always been our tradition. So first is explaining the Quran with the Quran. Allah says in the Quran that there's 2 types of verses: foundational verses and verses which have more than one meaning. And the people who have,
when you say Allah says that, you mean the Quran says that, or someone else says
yes.
that? Okay.
Yeah, whenever we say God said something or Allah said something, is the Quran. The Quran, unlike the Bible, for example, it only has God's speech. doesn't have anybody else's speech. Every word in the Quran is Allah's words, is God's speech. Allah may quote someone in the Quran, but still his words. It's like me quoting you, still my words. So all of the speeches in the Quran is God's words. The hadith or the sunnah is the prophetic tradition. So what the Prophet said, what the Prophet taught, we separate that from the Quran. When I say Allah said now, I'm referring to specifically the Quran. Whenever you hear.
Okay, yeah, I just don't know the lingo. You know,
yeah, no worries. So Allah says in chapter 3 of the Quran, verse 7, that you have foundational verses of the Quran and verses which have more than one meaning. And the people who have diseases in their heart, they go to the verses which have more than one meaning and they pick, like they try to misinterpret the verse so they can follow something evil. But Allah tells us what we can do. What we can do then is we take the verse that has more than one meaning and return it to the foundational verses. Because the foundational verses would explain the verses that have more than one meaning. Because there's other verses that talk about the same thing. And if you follow them, you would realize what the meaning is if you look at the verse that allows more than one meaning, if that makes sense. So we have foundational verses in the Quran, clear, explicit, and verse which has two meanings. One aligns with the rest of the verses and one doesn't. So you interpret that verse in line with the other verses. That's the right way of interpreting the Quran. Interpreting the Quran with the Quran. That's the first way. The second way to interpret the Quran or understand the Quran is the Sunnah, is the life of the Prophet, is his tradition, what he taught us. Allah tells us in the Quran explicitly that the Prophet, Allah sent down revelation, dhikr, the reminder to the Prophet so he can explain the Quran. Allah also says in the Quran that the Prophet will teach us the Quran. He will teach us the wisdom. He will teach us how to understand and apply this religion. And Allah tells us in the Quran that we have in the Prophet the best of examples. In the Prophet Muhammad, we have the best of example of how to practice our tradition and religion. So first, here is the first interpreter. We don't need, for example, a pope, because the Prophet already showed us. A prophet, a messenger of God, which is higher than a pope or an imam or a sheikh or whatever. The last and final messengers already showed us how to practice the religion. Then we have his companions, the companions of the Prophet. Allah says also again in chapter 9 of the Quran, verse 100, that the first group of companions from the people who migrated and the people who supported the Prophet, if we follow them, Allah will be pleased with us. So following the companions and their example as a whole, well, Allah will be pleased with us if we do. Why? Companions were there when the revelation was coming down. The Quran was revealed in 23 years, by the way. So the companions were there when the Quran was coming down. So they saw the reasons of relation, the context, and all of that. They were also the direct students of the Prophet, of course. So he taught them how to understand the verses of the Quran, and he explained the Quran to them. So
can I just, without saying like you're right or I'm right, to me this sounds similar to the idea that Jesus is a messenger. Of course, we say he's more than that, but okay. But then he had the apostles who he taught, right? So that's similar to the companions, right? And you have the scriptures themselves, which are seen as, I understand the difference, like we're not saying God literally wrote it in Greek, but it's inspired, right? So it's similar. And yet we still need an interpreter. We say God gave us an interpreter, like, so the companions, in a sense, the apostles had a structure that was continued through the bishops of the church. You don't have anything like that, correct?
Yeah, so the problem with what you're saying is that there is day and night difference between the Islamic position there and the Christian position. First is that Muslims have every detail about the Prophet. We're talking about how he used to sleep, which side, some narrations describing how many white hairs he had in his beard or something, one of the companions. Like, to that extent, what the Prophet ate, what the Prophet, what he drank, what he did with his wives, everything to do with Prophet Muhammad's life. And we have it historically, reliably attested. So it's not just, we don't have like manuscripts, like when in the case of Christianity, that comes 400 years later. We have nothing from the first 150 years. This is the case with Christianity. You have nothing from 150 years. We don't have this issue. We have not just that we have this clear description to do with everything with the Prophet's life, so we can understand and learn, but also we have the authenticity historically that traces back to Prophet Muhammad. So likewise with his companions. Now, if we look at the Bible, we know that all Christian scholars to do with textual criticism agree unanimously. Christian ones that are conservative and atheist ones that the four Gospels were not written by the disciples. They believe that. These were not written by the disciples. The names were attributed to them later on. I can give you names now. I mean,
I think there's some controversy, but like Luke was not one of the apostles. Yeah.
Luke for sure was not one of the apostles, but Mark was not
Right.
also one of the apostles.
Right,
Mark was
that's
not
true.
One of the
Yep.
apostles. Yeah.
Right.
So you have a student of Paul and a student of Peter. That's what you have, allegedly,
Mhm.
right? But also that assumes that the Gospel of Luke was written by Luke. I'm contesting this idea to begin with.
Yeah, it's not
Right.
in there.
Yeah,
I think it
but
is in
also
there.
Matthew.
But-
No. None of the disciples start by saying, "My name is this, and I'm writing this gospel." It doesn't exist. These names were added later on. This one, look, you don't have to take my word for anything I'm saying. Rather, I have an entire video which is called, "Do Muslims Believe the Bible is Corrupt?" The first section, like an hour, is all Christian scholars, conservative Christian scholars, the defenders of the Bible.
Mhm.
The most popular ones that are on the forefront admitting to what I'm telling you. So you have
Yeah, I understand. There's this idea of traditions that a letter may have been attributed to Paul, but it's part of the Pauline school.
No, we're not talking about Paul. I'm talking about the four Gospels now because we're talking about the disciples. Paul is a different story we talk about. But right now, I'm specifically referring to the Gospels, talking about the people who were walking with Jesus, right? Disciples. So first, we already know two of them are not even disciples. But I'm saying it's not even written by the students that they're attributed to. So you have Daniel B. Wallace, you have Philip Comfort, you have Bruce Metzger. They're all conservative scholars. They're defenders of the Bible. They're the ones who, by the way, revise the RSV and the NIV and all of these.
Bruce Metzger.
They're the ones who are revising your Bibles. So they all agree that they all say that the four Gospels are not written by the disciples. They're anonymously authored. And they would admit to the following. So for example, again, like I say, it's not my words. You don't need to, it's not my words. It's the words of the Christian scholars that are conservative. The ones that look at Scripture. Why do they say this? I'll give an example. Mark, we already know Mark wasn't a disciple. He wasn't walking with Jesus. He didn't meet Jesus. He's not a disciple. Okay. Matthew is allegedly a disciple of Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay. But do you know that 90% of the book of Matthew is copied from Mark? How could 90% of a person who was a disciple will copy 90% from someone who came later on who is a student of someone who he probably didn't even meet? So
I mean, these are theories. These are theories, but I've studied these theories.
No, it's not theories. It's copied word for word. I mean, you can.
Well, it could be the other way.
Mark and the Gospel of Matthew.
There are many similarities, but it could be either way. But I understand that there are theories.
The reason it cannot be other way because the earliest Gospel is Mark. You're welcome to search it now. You cannot say that Mark is copying from Matthew when Mark was earlier than Matthew written. This is this consensus.
But this is all based on theories and speculation.
No,
I understand scholars. Yeah.
No, it's not theories. It's based on carbon dating the manuscripts of the written works. How is that?
Oh no, we don't have any of the original manuscripts.
No, I know you don't. But what you have is that the earliest attested to gospel written. So you have quotes of church fathers or whatever. The earliest attested to being written, the first gospel attested to being written by consensus of scholars. You can say I'm going to throw all the scholars on the bus, but the consensus of scholars, and you're welcome to fact check me now, is that Mark is the earliest written gospel. So if Matthew, whoever is written, is written by anonymous author, because if it comes after Mark, anyways, it cannot be written by the disciples because it comes later on. That whatever the book of Matthew which was written copies 90% of Mark. That's why scholars, they say it cannot be from Matthew, but that's not the only reason. I mean, let me ask you this question. Very basic from the book itself. I'll give you just one example. I mean, scholars use many evidences, but the problem is people don't research. By the way, towards the beginning of this video, people were commenting. One person was commenting, I showed your video, the video I'm telling you about, to one of my Christian friends, and she's like completely shocked. Because people don't actually research what scholars say about manuscripts. We do, even though it's Christian scholars. But I actually see what they say. So when it comes to Matthew, I'll give you an example. So we already agreed that two of these Gospels are not written by the disciples. So you cannot make a comparison.
But by the apostles, I would say.
Disciples.
Disciples would mean, I mean, in Catholic understanding, an apostle is different than a disciple. I think you might have it backwards. Disciple would mean follower. Apostle would mean one of the 12.
I know.
Oh, okay.
No, I think what I'm saying is it's not written by the direct companions of Jesus. Because we were
those would be the apostles.
You can. I think it's the other way around, but whichever way you want to use it is fine. So it's semantics, obviously, whichever word we use. But the point I'm making is that they were not the direct. Yeah, they were not the direct people that were working with Jesus.
I agree with you about that.
Comparison. Yeah, you were making a comparison. I'm showing.
Nor was Paul a direct. Though we call him an apostle, he didn't have living.
No, he never met Jesus.
Yeah,
he never met Jesus. Yeah. So coming back to what I was saying. Now, for example, the Gospel of Matthew. Okay, Now, one evidence the scholars give that you can see, if you're writing Gospel of Matthew, right? You're Matthew, you're writing. And then there's an incident where Jesus comes and he says something to you. How would you write that? You're going to write, and Jesus came to my shop, for example. And he said to me, X, Y, and Z. And I said to him, X, Y, and Z. And then I stood up and followed him. Correct? Is that common sense?
I think it was written. I think all this was written after.
Okay,
Jesus'
so it's not written by Matthew then.
death.
So it's not written by Matthew then.
No, I think it could have been written by Matthew. I don't think it was written I don't think he was keeping a note. I'm not sure if that's what you're trying to say.
No, I'm trying to say it wasn't written by the disciple Matthew. So he wasn't supervising and saying, write this, or he wasn't writing it himself. Because if he did, yeah, but that's what I'm telling you. If he is, then when he's recording, he's going to say, Jesus came to me and he said this to me. And I said,
I see what you're saying. You would use first person.
He's speaking the first person. Yeah, he's speaking the first person is what I'm trying to say.
Like Paul does. You're saying Paul clearly.
Exactly.
In the letters. Yeah, except he's not writing a letter. The gospel is retelling a biography, right?
He wrote some letters. He wrote to the Corinthians, to Galatians, all of that. When he wrote letters, he spoke obviously in first person. I tell you this, I tell you that, right?
Yeah, right.
When he was writing, he was clearly speaking in the first person.
Now, I'm just saying a biography. You wouldn't necessarily, if you take the Gospels as a biography, you might not have yourself as a character in it, even though you witnessed it.
But you're the one, you're writing your meeting with Jesus. How are you going to write it? Are you going to write,
well, if I'm,
and Jesus met Matthew, and Jesus said to Matthew, and Matthew said to him, and you're writing this, you're Matthew? How would that make any sense?
I don't know. You're right to say, like, you look at genre studies and things like that. It's no problem for
basically
Christians to do that.
I'm sorry.
Sometimes it's theory, sometimes it's real, but
sure. No. I think with all respect to you, and I'm not saying that in any bad way. I think Christians are not only well read on these topics, but you also brush them under the carpet with all respect and under the bus when they're highlighted. So because
we do,
for example. Yeah. But the reality is, if you're a truth seeker, you go with the evidences. And the evidences is that when you go, for example, the book of Matthew, this one example, maybe scholars like G.B. Phillips and others, they highlight this and they say, look, you have in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 9, verse 9, you have, let me read it for you actually, word for word. Give me 1 second. That would be actually even better so you can understand what I'm saying. So Matthew 9:9, here's what it says. And Jesus went on from there. He saw a man named Matthew. But Matthew is the one writing. He's supposed to say, he saw me. No, it says, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. He told him, follow me. It's not he told me to follow him. He told him, follow me. And Matthew got up and followed him. It's not I got up and followed him. These are the reasons scholars will clearly show you. Look, this is written by someone other than, not only the fact that it's 90% of it is copied, not only the fact that it's later on, but also that the writer, all of these are evidences. There's many more that the scholars use. Now, you might say, okay, you might shake your head and do like, okay, maybe this or that. But the question is, what evidence do you have that any of the disciples have written anything? That should be, the burden of the proof is not on me to show that they didn't write it. You're supposed to show evidence that any of these people have written anything. So I'm going to ask you the question. Where is the evidence? Because now you're not only not given evidence, but you're kind of not accepting the evidence that shows you contrary to your position. So you should have evidence there. So what is the evidence that you have that any of the disciples have written anything?
Well, I don't really actually think it's like a central teaching of the Catholic Church that Matthew wrote Matthew. It's just called Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. It's attributed to him. I think that we would say this is apostolic. And I do think that there's historical evidence that like these writings come from very early after the time the Lord walked the earth.
400 years later.
No, I think I'm like, we don't have any extant manuscripts, but I do think there's a lot of evidence that, what is described there as the time. I'm not sure whether you would disagree with me, but like the events of Jesus' life are described fairly accurately, what was going on at the time. But don't Muslims believe that Jesus walked the earth at that time?
Yeah, we do.
Like,
but
don't you
believe? We do. By the way, but you're not conceding to the point when you said that you don't believe the church believed that Matthew was written by Matt. But that's the whole point I was making. to show the difference, because the main point, I'm going to take you back quickly, and then I'm going to come back to where we are now. Take you full circle. That comes back to the idea of interpretation and interpreters. We have a reliable
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So we have a reliable historical narrative where it shows the life of the Prophet, exactly what he did historically reliably and what his companions did. And therefore we can use that because they have shown us the understanding of how these verses are interpreted. Then Allah tells us in the Quran that if you disagree over anything, return it to these sources. Allah tells us that in chapter 4. So if a Muslim comes and says, I understand this verse this way, I'll say, okay, who of the companions understood it this way? Or the students? Or did the Prophet understand it this way? If the answer is no, and my understanding I have evidences for, then I can use that as evidence against the other Muslim saying your understanding is inaccurate. Therefore, it doesn't matter if we had, therefore it doesn't matter if we had different people disagree on different things. Now, the last thing I want to say quickly.
Sure.
So we believe in Jesus. We believe he was the Messiah. We believe in his second coming. We believe in his miraculous birth. We believe he was sent by God. We believe in all of that. We believe he came to the children of Israel and he preached to them. But we don't believe what Christians hold today in their hand that they call the Bible is a historically reliable attestation of what he said and did. And I would also make the claim that you don't have any evidence to support that.
Well, I mean, I couldn't go through all of the evidence, but I mean, I think there's
any evidence.
But the problem with this argument is you don't have any other document about Jesus other than the New Testament.
Sure.
Right?
So the thing.
So you're saying this isn't true, but you don't have any
other
gospel, right?
Sure. Yeah. So in Islam, our religion is not about following any human being. It's about submission to the one true creator, God. Now, in Islam, we don't need, for example, a full biography of Abraham, of Jesus, of Moses, of Noah. We don't need that because these previous prophets and messengers sent to the children of Israel. Jesus himself, if you take the Bible to be reliable, he says that I've been only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He says that in Matthew 15, verse 24, where he's speaking to the Canaanite woman. So he's only sent to those people. We don't need to have like a full description of his life. Now, the Quran has information about some of the teachings of Jesus, mainly for the Christians, who we believe have kind of changed the identity of Jesus and his message. So the Quran has some questions.
I understand.
What makes the Quran reliable? It's not about how many years was it before or after. It's about that we can establish that it's divine speech from God with evidence. And if you can do that, the minute you do that, then what God says is historically accurate and not any anonymous writing. That's the reason we accept it. But I'm not telling you have to take the Quran as a historical source. I'm telling you as a Christian, because that has nothing to do with me as a Muslim. What happens with a lot of Christians is that they start thinking about Muslims when they're asked about Christianity. No. You have to think as a Christian. Christianity has nothing to do with this now. So as a Christian, if I have zero sources to the life of Jesus, what he did, and I cannot historically accurately know what he said or did, then how can I base my entire salvation on a book which is not historically accurate? Regardless of Islam, because like I said, Islam is not Christianity. This is a religion. It's a different religion. Someone comes and asks me about evidence for Islam, I'll speak about Islam. I don't need to go to Christianity. So that's the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that Christians do not have any evidence to show us or show anybody that this is literally what Jesus said, or that this is historically attested or attributed to Jesus.
I mean, I have a formal education, not primarily on the Bible, but I do think that textual analysis, genre analysis, all this type of stuff has occurred, and I do believe we've kind of weathered the storm fairly well, that the New Testament holds up fairly well. There are some things we have to still have faith in, the resurrection, but it holds up fairly well. Now, you might say, no, it doesn't, but that would take years of us looking through the evidence. And I'm not saying there weren't criticisms and that there's textual variants, and we don't have the original manuscripts. A lot of things that maybe Christians believe we have the original copies are not true, but I don't think that means there's no evidence just because you don't have all of the evidence. I think you would admit that there's some evidence. You might say it shouldn't be sufficient for belief, right? Isn't that what the argument would be? But my question has more to do with...
I would disagree. Yeah. Sorry, I'll just answer this very, very quickly.
Yeah.
I disagree that absolutely doesn't hold up fairly well at all. And that is the point I was making in the video, which I'd recommend you watch. The Muslims believe the Bible is corrupted.
I'll
because
take a
what
look.
I do is because when you say holds up fairly well, according to who? Can you mention any names of the conservative scholars that say this? Textual criticism scholars that are respected.
I can't remember all their names, but I do think there was the way that when science encountered the New Testament, like it was mostly Protestants. They attacked it pretty hard, and then there was a way in which actually a lot of their criticisms turned out not to be very substantial. But that's just scholars.
No, I'm saying today, can you give me a name of one scholar that claims that what you said holds up fairly well, meaning that we don't have great corruption in the manuscripts? Can you bring me one person?
Oh,
I mean, you recognize
all Catholic theologians.
No, I mean, yeah, but you're not mentioning any scholars. So I mentioned
the Catholic Church has tons of scholars.
No, we're talking about textual criticism scholars. So people who study.
I don't know. I'm not familiar. It's not my specialty, but
no worries. So that's the point I'm making. That's why I said a lot of Christians are not well versed. Why did I say the video was shocking to many people? Like when I mentioned to you Bruce Metzger, you know Bruce Metzger.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that name. Yeah,
because he's one of the most well-known figure. Of course, he passed away, but he's one of the well-known figures. Now the person who took his shoes is Daniel B. Wallace. Bruce Metzger was the mentor of Daniel B. Wallace. And Daniel B. Wallace is, you can say, the leading expert scholar, conservative, when it comes to New Testament textual criticism. And then you have Philip Comfort, who is quoted a lot by Bruce Metzger in his books. So if you know Bruce Metzger, then you see the connections I'm making here to highlight to you how these are the leading scholars. Now, what do they say? They don't say it holds up very well. They would agree with the following. There are hundreds of that. Look, Daniel B. Wallace says literally every single manuscript we have is corrupted. And there is no perfect manuscripts. We have to look at the differences, and they all contradict each other. He says there is like 400 to 500 different variants.
Yeah, that doesn't mean contradictions. But...
Yeah, I'll answer that. But that's why I'm saying Christians are not well read. Because he says these variants are not the word Jesus and T, or the word Lord and Jesus, for example. No, he's saying these are not the variants. He says what he considers a variance is if there's 1,000 Jesus and 1,000 Lord in 1,000 manuscript, this is just one variant. He's saying with this method of counting, there is 400 to 500,000 variants. Then he speaks about the ones that are meaningful. They change the meaning. And he speaks about the ones that are viable and non-viable. He says there are over 125,000 changes that are meaningful, significantly change the meaning. Over 125,000. We're not talking about that's what I'm saying. When people say holds up fairly well, I always ask them, okay, according to who? Who have you really read on this? You have, for example, the Nestle Allen 28. You have the United Biblical Society. These are books which shows you the transcriptions and the differences in the meaning, right? We're not talking about just differences in word here, word there, scribal errors. We're not talking about that. Daniel B. Wallace admits that when he says they were copying, for example, Mark or whatever, he also admits that the scribes were intentionally changing the writings. They were not for example, making errors. No. They found contradictions, he said. When they were copying from one gospel to another, they found contradictions in synoptics. So we were trying to fix the contradictions by intentionally changing the words. You have, Origin of Alexandria. You're a Catholic. You're supposed to know Origin of Missouri, right? You know Origin of Alexandria.
Origin, sure. Yeah.
Yes. So Origin of Alexandria is the founding father of textual criticism. He's the first one. You know, he says, and by the way, we're talking about 2nd, 3rd century scholars here. He said that the deficiencies and the changes and the corruption of the manuscript have become so far and so wide at his time because of the arrogance of the scribes. Imagine, he's talking in the 2nd century telling you, and 3rd century is telling you that this is happening, let alone what's happening now. So what a lot of people don't understand is that a lot of people have not done research truly about the extent to which the Bible is corrupted. So when we say as Muslims, let me highlight now what we mean. There is hearsay, a lot of hearsay, of course, about Jesus after he died. There's so much hearsay that transmitted. Now, some of these hearsay can be true. But the point we're making is that you cannot use the Bible as a reliable historical source for what Jesus said or didn't say or did or didn't do. That's the point.
But you would have no alternative either.
I would have the Quran, which is sent for me today. Why do I need scripture that was for the past if I have a scripture that was sent today where it corrects? Just like, for example...
But no one's going to make the argument that the Quran has firsthand knowledge. You're saying it's divine clarification. But no one's going to make the argument that the Prophet Muhammad knew what happened 700 years before him.
I'm making the argument. Like I'm no one.
But not in a normal human sense, right? It'd be like Paul.
Yeah.
Isn't that
No,
right?
it wouldn't be. No, it wouldn't be, because Paul was a personal experience encounter when he was going on his road to Damascus.
Yeah.
He saw light. Where he says in his letters, devil will come to you as the angel of light. And then he says he saw light. But that's irrelevant. Point is,
Yeah, I
Islam-
understand the whole thing of like textual criticism. I would
Yeah.
say from what I've studied, I think that the consensus of scholars is that the New Testament holds up pretty well. Now, if you say, well, what does pretty well mean? I think it holds up pretty well. It's like saying, is it hot
does
in
that
here?
mean?
Someone might say, I feel like it's hot in here. Of course, as a Catholic, I trust the church.
no, what do you think it means? Holds up
Well-
pretty well. What do you think it means?
Well, actually, I don't. As Catholics, we don't really rely on the Bible like Muslims rely on the Quran. We
Okay,
rely
I'll
on
take the
the
problem now.
interpreters of
Hmm.
the Bible.
I know.
We just have a different system. Like, so I
that's the
understand that
problem.
in the Muslim world, to say you're a scholar is almost like the Pharisees at the time of our, of the Lord. They had a kind of quasi-religious view. In Christianity, you realize scholars don't really have that. We don't. They're just secular. You know what I mean? They're not like part. There are Catholic scholars, but
That's why all I quoted were conservative Christian scholars. I did not
Yeah.
quote Bart Ehrman. I did not quote David C. Parker. I did not quote that. By the way, there's two schools: the conservative school, and then there is
Yeah.
the agnostic school. I did not quote anybody. If the agnostic school is much harsher than what I quoted to you.
sure.
You hear this
Yeah.
and you think this is mind blowing, but I haven't even talked about the other ones that are. By the way, Bart Ehrman would be debating against Daniel B. Wallace, and Daniel B. Wallace defends the Bible against Bart Ehrman. So I could quote
Yeah.
Bart Ehrman, who is attacking the Bible, but I didn't. I quoted the one who is defending the Bible. I'm telling you, even those ones defending the Bible go to
Yeah.
that extent. So now the problem with Catholicism, this idea,
Mhm.
is you have a circular argument. You say we don't rely on the Bible, we rely on the church. We tell you, where does the church get the authority from? It says from the Bible. Where does the Bible get the authority from? From the church. So you have a circular argument there. So where does the church get the authority from?
From Jesus Christ. Before there was ever a Bible, there was a church.
No,
Before there
but
was
how
ever
do you
any
know
New
that?
Testament, there was a church.
Yeah,
So
how
the
do you know that?
church, the Bible comes from the church. It's not a circular argument, but I mean, you could say, I don't believe that Jesus founded a church. And then I could quote something from the Bible.
No,
I
but-
get that you're saying, but the
I'm
idea
asking
is
the
that this
question,
was
how do you
originally
know?
the gospel was originally verbal, oral tradition. I think probably that's
No,
true
no.
of the Quran. I'm not sure.
No. I'm talking about the Bible right now. I'm asking you,
Yeah.
how do you know what Jesus did about church or not? This is the whole point I'm making from the Bible.
How do I know what?
You said that Jesus is the one who gave the authority to the church. Where do you get that from? Where's the source that you got this information from?
Oh, yeah. So it was written down in the Bible, but it originally
So
happened.
you're making my point.
It happened
So the Bible gives the authority to the church.
without it being written down.
Yeah. So without the information that Jesus have given authority to the church by giving them authority in the Bible, without this piece of information, you don't have authority for the church. Do you see? A lot of people don't. By the way, I had a friend who's a Catholic who left Catholicism and became a Muslim because of this point only. I told him, look, as a Catholic, the biggest problem with Catholicism is you have a circular argument. You try to give authority to the church using the Bible. You try to give authority to the Bible using the church.
Okay, but wouldn't
have
the
to do
Quran
one
and
of
Muhammad have this? The Prophet Muhammad have the same
No,
thing?
no.
No?
It wouldn't, because our problem is that the Bible doesn't give authority to the church because it's corrupt. If the Quran is corrupt, it would make sense. Then we cannot use it to give authority to Prophet Muhammad because it's corrupt. But if it's
Okay, so you're
preserved-
saying it's not a circular argument because the
If the Bible
Quran
is
is
preserved.
perfect. So then your problem is not
Yeah.
the circularity of the argument. The problem is that you think the Bible is not trustworthy.
No. My problem is the circularity part. Is we're
Well,
not
but then
proving it-
Quran Muhammad would be the same circle.
Yeah, sure. That's what I'm. Okay, try to get this with me and to understand what I'm saying. The circularity. is,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
The circularity would only be if you don't prove either part. This is where the fallacy comes in. So when I try to prove a part, the Bible, you go to the church. When I try to prove the church, you go to the Bible. This is where the circularity comes in. So you don't prove any of them independently. With the Quran and Prophet Muhammad, we already proved the Quran independently using the Quran itself. We bring the evidences that.
And you
are
don't
in
think
the
that's
Quran.
circular? You
How
prove the
is it
Quran
circular?
by using the Quran, you don't think that sounds circular?
That's not circular.
Ultimate circularity.
That's not circularity
Right?
if the evidence... No, absolutely not. That's not circularity if the evidence in the Quran can be established objectively outside the Quran.
Oh, okay. So then so what is that
for
process
instance,
called?
For example, I'll give an example. So if the Quran makes multiple prophecies of the future, and then we observe these prophecies, then this is information in the Quran, but proves the Quran externally by the events happening outside the Quran. So this is an example.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
When we say the Quran, so when we say the Quran proves itself, that's what I mean. I mean the information within it, we can make objective arguments outside of the Quran itself to prove that this must be the speech from God.
But we would say the same is true of the scriptures.
No, but
I know that you disagree, but it's not essentially a different argument.
No, it's not this. It's not that we disagree. It's that the Quran, regardless of evidence, is historically preserved. So we can rely on it as a historically reliable source. The Bible isn't. But I also make the claim that the Bible doesn't have... So two claims here. I've already established the first one, I would say, from Christian scholarship. But the one about the Bible is historically reliable. But the second one I'm going to make is also that the Bible doesn't have any objective evidence for its truth. And you're welcome to present one to me. One, the Bible. Because you have to prove the Bible now using the Bible.
Of course. The teachings of Jesus are... the teachings of Jesus are the perfect articulation of... But this is just me saying this, are obviously the teachings of God, and they work themselves out in life.
We were talking about objective evidences, and that's what it's not subjective opinion. I mean, I can look at the Quran and say the Quran sounds like it's God's words. You're not going to accept that as evidence. So what you have is objective evidence that you can present as a Christian that the Bible is from God. By the way, I asked this question many times. Nobody's...
Oh, yeah, sure. So the conquering of the entire Roman Empire through martyrdom and love is unprecedented in history. There's nothing before or since.
So if Constantine accepted Christianity, therefore Christianity is true? How does that follow logically?
Well, that's one aspect of it. If the church took over the
argument.
Well, I'm saying that in the New Testament, Jesus says, go and make believers of all nations. And that happened in a way which nothing prior to it can, nor since, could
false.
Possibly...
Jesus didn't go to other nations and spread the gospel.
No, his apostles did.
Oh, okay. So you said Jesus. So, but I'm saying, you're saying...
So he predicted that. And, the humble, the meek shall inherit the earth, all that stuff.
He didn't predict that. He commanded them to do that. So that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. He said, go and preach the religion. So you wouldn't accept when I tell... By the way, Muslims had the biggest empire in history, you could say. And we're talking about 100 years from Prophet Muhammad. You're not going to accept that as evidence. Because that's not...
I would say that God worked through the Muslim thing. I wouldn't say that means Islam is true, but I do think that is something where the hand of God was working. So I wouldn't say... How does that make
Christianity true?
How does that make Christianity true?
Yeah, if you don't say that it makes Islam true, because...
because I would say the difference is...
Greater empire, by the way, a way greater empire than just Constantine. The only reason Christianity spread in the Roman Empire is because of Constantine. And also it was the demolition of Christianity because, of course, he's the one who established the council. He was the emperor, of course. So when he accepted the faith, then the subject accepted the faith after him. That's just common sense. So, but Muslims who actually did not have Constantine or Kurusu or any of these big major empires, except Muslims fought against the Roman Empire and defeated them, actually in an army of both the Roman empires. So if you really want to talk about expansion and whatever, and believers doing something, Islam would be the example, not Christianity. I'm saying with Christianity now, I'm saying with Christianity now, because you do not know what the first believers that were going around teaching were teaching. That's again my point. You don't have anything reliable from them. I'm going to make it because I believe that the followers of Jesus was preaching the same thing I believe. One true God worthy of worship. He didn't preach the Trinity. But I'm going to ask the question. Yeah, I'm going to ask the question again. That's not objective evidence, Ben, my friend, to say that just because religion spread in a particular place in the world, that therefore this religion must be true. That doesn't follow logically. So when I ask for objective evidence that from the Bible that proves the Bible, you have to give me an actual example.
Well, the miracles, the saints.
What miracles? What saints?
Oh, I could
What
list
miracles?
thousands of testified miracles.
Subjective. So,
How miracles objective?
No. Non-verifiable testimonies of believers that say, "Oh, we saw this or we saw that." It's not objective evidence. I cannot see it. Cannot test it. Objective.
No, you can test. You can test miracles.
Okay, give me a miracle that I can test today.
Someone who's healed, who prays to a saint, who is objectively healed, where you can medically look at what the doctor said, and then you see. Of course, a miracle.
Can you give me an example like this? Yeah, can you bring me a person who's not healed, and then me and him can I can go to someone who I know who can test him and can do an MRI scan and can see the sickness, and then we can see him healed.
Eucharistic miracles, you can go see them. Yeah.
No, but to say just go see them, and you're not giving examples. You're not giving anything we can test. Like,
I don't have every miracle that's occurred.
Yeah, but that's my point.
20
okay. Anyways,
centuries.
I think sure. I think my point.
There may be Muslim miracles too, so I'm not. That would be evidence.
There is, but it's not evidence. No. We say there is. By the way, we have some concept called karamat, which is these miraculous acts that happen for righteous Muslims. But none of us uses them as evidence because, again, like I said, I cannot demonstrate it to you right now objectively. Therefore, I'm not going to come to you and be like, Ben, believe in Islam, because Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, a scholar in Islamic history, have had the following karam.
Maybe we're just speaking different languages. When you say prove it objectively, I'm not trying to play tricks with you. I'm just saying maybe that means something different to you than it means to me. Maybe it's just a different worldview. We're coming from different places.
Let me define it. Objective is something that is not based on first-person experience that you and me can test out. You and me can agree this is consistent and rational, that I can test out today and verify. If you don't have anything like that, you have nothing objective for Christianity.
Well, so I would think a miracle that you could investigate would meet that criteria. But I think there's much more to a religion than
I'll tell you the miracles I saw. I saw these miracles of this African dude somewhere in Africa who says he has the Holy Spirit and he flies, and there's 2 ropes tied in his back, and he pretends that he's doing a miracle of flying. I saw that woman in the Christian government. She was going, I'm healing people, and she was making these noises. I don't know if you saw that recently. This woman that's related to Trump, but she's making noises at people are falling. I'm sorry to say, but this is what we've been seeing. I mean, you talk about investigation. This is the investigation I have done. Most people, with all due respect, I'm not saying this to disrespect you. Most people look at these things and laugh. They're like, come on. You're not going to mumble something and tell me this is tongues and I'm speaking tongues and people are being healed and whatever. Look, I've looked into that.
I don't think that's a miracle.
And by the way, I've seen actual examples of liars who've been exposed in many places in the Middle East where they go to churches, they pretended that they were Muslims. They wear an entire niqab, a full covering, and they go to the church and pretend, and they're exposed later as Christians. So I've seen many examples of lies. That's what I've seen. I haven't seen in front of
I mean, no one's going to argue that everyone who claims to do something miraculous is telling the truth. That's ridiculous.
Where is the evidence I can look at?
Well, I believe that you could find tons and tons of verifiable people who are atheists, people who are. I don't have it offhand, but if you look up Eucharistic miracles.
Ben, but we're coming back to the same point. You're telling me a person who's an atheist had a personal experience. A person who's an atheist has a personal experience.
Examined examined something under a microscope and couldn't explain it.
Okay, give him one example.
That's what I'm talking about.
One example. I mean, you're saying there's thousands, but you're not giving me
the miracle of Fatima. It's probably the most. The miracle of Fatima is probably
the miracle of Fatima is in the Bible. We're trying to prove the Bible.
No, the miracle of Fatima in 1917 in Portugal, in Fatima, Portugal, which I know Fatima is a Muslim name.
And how can I verify?
Well, there were accounts of people who went there to disprove it and said, I witnessed this occurring.
How can I verify that those people were not people who are lying to support their belief or say, like the people I were telling you?
Because they were atheists. They were militant atheists, many of them.
Yeah, how do you know?
I mean, if you say, how do I know something's true that someone said? Of course, you can always say, I don't believe them.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you cannot verify this information today. The people are not alive today. You don't see what they believe in. And you don't know if it's a forgery that someone has attributed things to people that haven't happened. So,
you do. A newspaper from 1917.
The miracle. Ben,
No,
I'm
that's
sorry,
not possible.
but you really gotta process information with me a little bit. Can I see the miracle of Adam with my eyes today?
The miracle of Adam?
Yeah, the actual thing happening. That didn't you say Adam or something? Was that what you were saying?
Fatima.
Okay, I thought you said Adam. Okay, can I see that today with my own eyes?
No.
Okay, then it's not evident. That's the point. Like the point that I keep making.
But that's what an
is
atheist
it
would say.
something? No,
An atheist would say, I need to see proof with my own eyes.
No worries.
And if a God exists, he'll show me with my own eyes.
Can I answer that? No worries. Great point. Now let me answer you. I can give an atheist another type of epistemological evidence that is not necessarily based on seeing, but is objective. I'm not going to say to the atheist, for example, I'm not going to go to atheist and say, look, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, multiplied water for the army when he was alive. Therefore, this is the miracle of Prophet Muhammad. By the way, more attested than any miracle you have, because we have eyewitness accounts and their names and biographies and everything. I'm not
denying that there can be Islamic miracles. I don't believe God is bound.
No, the point I'm making, I'm not going to say to the atheist that therefore Islam is the truth, because he's going to say to me, I haven't seen this. And then I'm like, okay. But what I can give him is, look, I'll give you a few examples because maybe that can make it easier for you to understand. Look,
sure.
For example, in Islam, you have many things mentioned in the Quran about the natural world, right? Things that mention about mountains, things that mention about cosmology and stuff like that. Today, with our modern equipment, we are discovering that what the Quran is saying is true. So it's something that Prophet Muhammad could not have known at his time because information wasn't accessible. For instance, the Quran talking about the expansion of the universe. The Quran talking about embryology and the stages where the baby develops, stage by stage. The Quran talking about clouds and how heavy they are and weigh tons. Things that we are discovering today in the 2000s. And they say, oh, it's a marvelous discovery of a scientist. Another example is the Quran mentioning historical events that he couldn't have access. Didn't exist in the Bible, didn't exist in previous scriptures. And the hieroglyphics were dead because we didn't have the Rosetta Stone, so he couldn't have read it. The temples that information is in were buried under the sand, and today we're discovering them. Another example of that is the prophecies. As I said to you, Prophet making multiple prophecies of the future that are all occurring in front of our eyes today. So it's certain we have a carbon dated that time and it's happening today. This is what an objective evidence is, because the atheist can see the carbon dated writing and can see today the event happening and can verify it from the scientific magazine, can look at the information happening. So he wouldn't come and tell me that, oh, I need to see, because I'm like, here, see for your own eyes.
Okay, so you're saying Muslims have better luck with atheists than Christians? No, they don't.
No, I'm saying Muslims have evidence while Christians don't.
But you're just saying evidence is what I'm saying and what you don't. But I'll look into those things. I don't think they hold up super well. But
what doesn't hold up?
Here's my question to you. So if you don't need an interpreter, right? And I'm not trying to say like I have an answer to this. Certainly you can. There has been a debate. I think you call it Wahhabism, which is saying like we need to conquer the world like by the sword, this more violent strain. Then you have people who say it's mostly an inner jihad. This stuff belonged to that time, but doesn't belong to our time. We should talk with people and never conquer by the sword, right? Who interprets what is correct? I just think if you say, I just like when I talk to Protestants, they will say the Bible interprets itself, all the same arguments. But then in actual fact, you end up with people who totally disagree. And isn't that also true in the Islamic world? You have people who totally disagree, all of whom claim that they're correctly interpreting the Quran, right?
Yeah, okay,
you don't speak with one voice. Muslims do not speak with one voice.
Yeah,
right?
So I'm sorry to say this, but I mean, a lot of the people are commenting this, but I'm just gonna say it as well. Is there's a big sense of denial, and I think I could even bring up an atheist right now. Yeah, a big sense of denial. I could bring up an atheist right now, and he will tell you, okay, I understand that this is objective evidence, and I understand that a story that someone said, that a group of people said, oh, we saw this, is not objective evidence. So you can say, I'm just making it this. No, it's not. It's just the reality that objective has a definition in language, and subjective also has a definition, which is based on first-person subjective experience. What Christians do is that they have blind faith, and they rely on first-person subjective experiences and testimonies of others of first-person subjective experiences. That's the only evidence that Christians always present.
Well, Catholics rely on authority. Overtly. We would say we overtly rely on the living authority.
If I could finish.
Sure.
If I could just so I can give the point. I understand the point you made with authority. That's why I was telling you that this is essentially the circular argument that you were making. which is essentially you're given the authority using the Bible. So I told you, prove the Bible. Then you just right now doing the secular argument by saying we have the authority from the church. So you see, you don't notice it happens subconsciously with Christians, with Catholics, and some Orthodox as well. But they don't notice it. You cannot give authority to the church using the Bible without proving the Bible first, and vice versa. This is a circular argument. So when you say they never conquered by the sword, and you just mentioned weird names, you probably referring to people I'm not familiar with. I don't know what the word you use. You said a group of people.
Wahhadi, like, isn't there a kind of militant Islamic interpretation?
No. Yeah, some people, you're talking about Wahhabi. That's what you're trying to say.
Wahhabi, something like that.
Yeah.
I know it's a small group. I know they get exaggerated, but they do claim they're reading the Quran authentically.
That's not a sect in Islam anyways. That's not a sect in Islam. There was never a sect. There was a person in Islamic history called Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. And then some people viewed him as extreme. And then they started using that word instead of extremism. Oh, we're going to call you this if you do something extreme. But there isn't a group which has, for example, set of beliefs. This is what we believe in. The article number 1 for Wahhabism. They don't have like, oh, these are sets of books. That doesn't exist. So I think...
Well, it's a movement.
I just want to...
Like the IS people are part of a movement, right? Militant.
Yeah, I mean,
jihadists.
The IS people is a creation of both Israel and the US, with the admission of Trump, with the admission of Obama, with the admission of Hillary Clinton. We said we literally created them. They talk about funding them. They talk about arresting leaders among them who were from the Mossad. Literally, they were arrested and then later on discovered.
I don't doubt.
So these people are, so they're used to make Muslims look, but they're not Wahhabis or whatever, right? They're not that. Of course,
I don't know.
Let me explain one thing, which is because
I mean, I think someone like Osama bin Laden thought he was a Muslim.
Sure. Let me highlight. Yeah, of course he did. So there is people who do extremism, but they don't have a name. The name is extremism, and extremism has no religion. The Crusades, the KKK, the bombing of Hiroshima in Japan and Nagasaki, the followers of the Nazis that had Christ on their belt or whatever. Anybody can make this argument, but extremism is extremism. Yeah, so the point I'm making is extremism doesn't have a name. This idea of Wahhabism or whatever. Extremism is extremism. We can throw names.
Well, my point is you don't have an authentic interpretation. So an extremist can point to the Quran and say, look, this verse seem to endorse violence, so that's what we should do. And I don't know how you would push back against that.
Okay,
if
you allow me, Ben, and if you allow me to finish my point, unless you want to say something else, I'm happy to hear it. But the problem is I'm trying to get to that part, but then you say something else, and it's very hard then for me to get to that part.
No problem.
No worries.
I appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate it, but I'm trying to start with everything you said because you mentioned Wahhabism, so I'm clarifying that. Then I'm going to the point about conquered by the sword, and we say there's no such thing as a sword. I'm going to the second. I'm hearing what you're saying. It's all in my mind. Then I'm going to interpretation. I'm a very logical person in my in my speech. So I try to.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking about, interpretation.
Sure. So let me. But I gotta clarify what you say to the people watching. So when you say, we don't. Then you have Wahhabi saying by the sword, and then the rest of Muslims saying we don't have the sword. No, we don't believe that. We believe in Islam that force can be used when necessary. Allah says in the Quran, fight those who fight you. And do not transgress, for Allah doesn't love those who transgress. Islam is not a pacifistic religion. It's a religion where you will defend yourself. You will remove persecution if someone is doing persecution or doing evil from other people. We believe in that. We don't have any issues with that. So no group ever says there's no such thing as a sword. There is a sword. Okay? But that sword is not applied with injustice. Prophet told us not to kill women, children, destroy crops, trees, kill innocent people. That's not. Unlike the Bible, by the way, which sadly says that it talks about infants and camel and sheep and crazy things, God commanding the murder of them, which doesn't exist in any other scripture of the other so-called Abrahamic faith. So when it comes to the interpretation now, I've already answered that question. If we can come back to what I said before. For instance, the idea of the sword. How is the sword applied? I'm right now giving you what the Prophet said. The Prophet said, do not kill women, do not kill children. So here is how we understand the application of the idea of the sword. Allah does not forbid you from those who don't fight you because of religion. Do not kick you out of your homes from being just towards them. Allah loves those who are just. Allah only forbids you from those who fight you because of religion. Chapter 6 of the Quran, verse 8 and 9. Okay? So how do we know what to apply? We apply it using the Quran. Allah tells us to fight those who fight and not to transgress. Allah tells us if people incline to peace, then you also should incline to peace. So you see, it's very clear. Now you cannot do the same with the Bible. Now you're saying, oh, but you're
can I just put? Are you telling me that Muslims all agree on this?
Listen, yes. All Muslims have to agree on this. All Muslims have to agree on this, whether they like it or not, because it's in the Quran. Chapter 4 of the Quran, verse 59. So they can disagree all they want, but the Quran itself tells you, if you have any issues, if you have disagreements over anything, the criteria is the Quran and the Prophet. So
but like Sunni Shia, right? Like that's been going on for what, 500 years?
Do you know about Sunni and Shiism or no?
I tried to understand it. It has to do with the followers, right? The companions. And who is the authentic?
No, it has to do. Look, there was a historical event, and it's very hard to, summarize this quickly. But let me try.
I know, yeah, it's tricky. Yeah.
Look, it's history. It's all to do with history. It's not a theological thing. It became a theological thing later. It was never a theological thing in the beginning. So there was a companion of the Prophet, the third caliphate. He was assassinated. Uthman ibn Affan. He had a relative who was seeking justice for him, his blood. He wanted to punish the people who murdered him. Okay? He wanted to bring justice against the people who murdered him. And then the fourth caliphate who took the leadership after him, he saw that militant groups that killed that third caliphate are still there. And now it's not a good time because we don't know exactly who did it. If we bring them all together, there will be riots, there will be issues. So we had two views. One person who needed revenge or vengeance for his, rightly so, because he was killed peacefully in his house. And the other side said it's not the right time. Okay? So we had this disagreement now. So that the person who wanted the blood of that person back, he refused to give allegiance to the fourth caliphate. He's like, I'm not going to give allegiance until the person is, the blood is given back. Okay? Then they were trying to reconcile between each other. There were two groups trying to reconcile. They met each other and they sent people to reconcile and speak. Then you had the same militants. They attacked the army of one group and they said the other group is attacking you. And they attacked the army of the other group and said the other group is attacking you. Then fighting happened to protect the wife of the Prophet at that time, right? This is the ma'araka of the Jamal, the battle of the Jamal. So this is how issues were happening. It had nothing to do with, we believe in this. You believe in that. So because we believe in this and you believe in that, we're going to... No, it wasn't like that. Then later on, the people who aligned with the fourth caliphate called themselves the Shia to Ali. The group, Shia means group. We are the group of Ali, the group that aligned with the leader who said it's not the time right now. Okay? Then later on, religious beliefs started to develop. Then started saying, no, actually Ali, he was supposed to be the first caliphate. But they took it away from him. No, he's actually infallible and he knows the unseen and he controls the universe and he's going to come back. And then all the people who come from his lineage are all infallible people that are divinely appointed by Allah, like the Pope idea. That came later on. Okay? I'm talking hundreds of years later. So if that comes later on, that's not a disagreement because of the interpretation of the Quran. Okay? So I'm tracing you now back to the history.
But it is a different interpretation, right?
It's not. Because
they both would claim to be Muslims, right?
No, it's not because it's not based on the Quran. It's based on a historical event. So if you go to the Shia, for example, by the way, I have a video on my channel already. I have many videos, of course. But one of the videos, I speak to a Shia girl. And she...
You're yourself Sunni, is that right?
I'm a Muslim. That's what I am. That's what the Quran and Sunnah command us to follow. Allah says in the Quran, don't divide yourselves into sects. Don't call yourself different things. Allah named you. Do you remember? You see, the way I answer that question is using the Quran. And this is what Muslims are supposed to do. They're supposed to respond and follow their faith based on what the text says, not what their opinions are. So the difference is Muslims can find out what the truth is, but a Christian can't. Christian has to rely on opinions, has to rely on this church father or that church father's interpretation. No, a Muslim can trace back to the preserved text of the Prophet and the Quran. So now the idea of, I told you this discussion with Shia, she's speaking to scholars of Shiism. And I told her, you guys believe in 12 people that are infallible, called 12 imams or whatever, after the Prophet, divinely appointed, everybody must follow them. Can you show me in the Quran? There's nowhere. You have an issue with the companions of the Prophet because they had an argument with Ali. They say, most of them are disbelievers. I say, Allah says in the Quran, they are the examples for us to follow. I give you a verse before. There's many verses. Allah tells us in the Quran in multiple places that they are our examples to follow. And if we follow them, Allah will give us paradise and He's pleased with us. They talk badly some about the wife of the Prophet. Allah in the Quran says the wives are the mothers of the believers. So what I can do with the Shia very easily is I'm like, here's the Quran that you say you believe in. And Allah says me and you should come back to it. Here's what the Quran teaches. You can do that. I can do that. Anybody can do that. But now when it comes to the Bible, where I can
But they
go,
won't agree with you, of course. They won't agree with you.
Yeah. The truth is not based on people's preferences or opinions. It's
I
based
agree.
on-
Everyone will have
Yeah, yeah.
controversies.
So if the text says thou shall not kill and someone says no, I disagree, it doesn't say we say you're mad because it clearly says thou shall not kill, irrelevant of what you think it says. It says thou shall not kill. It's an objective statement. So you cannot just say because someone disagrees, therefore that's an interpretation. No, an interpretation is based on evidence. It's not just based on somebody saying, okay, I don't agree. Like you, with all the respect, has been happening in this discussion. It's not based, I don't agree with these scholars. No, you're supposed to give evidence why you disagree. You're supposed to refute the evidence that I'm giving you. So it's not just, oh, I think, therefore that's an interpretation and evidence. It doesn't work that way. Okay,
it's a different way of looking at it. I don't want to take too much of your time.
Yeah,
but I appreciate you. I'm trying to grasp the differences. I take it for granted that no matter what the text is, you do have to interpret it, and there can be a multiplicity of interpretations. But you would say the Quran is unique in that it does not need interpretation. I think you would say it needs interpretation, but that it's clear enough that you don't need something like a magisterium or a teaching authority.
No, I said it already has an interpretation. It's preserved, which is the Prophet and the companions, how they understood it.
I mean, beyond the written, that you need you know what I mean by interpretation.
We'll go back to this is where you go back to the scholars, and the scholars have to use the evidence. We don't follow the scholars blindly. So the only reason I would follow a scholar, if a scholar says, for example, do this or don't do that, he needs to tell me because the Prophet said, or because the companions did, for example, or because Allah said. If he doesn't do that, then I don't need to follow his words. This is how Muslims function. Christians don't function that way. And that's why every time I speak to a Christian, he's got his own understanding of the Bible. And there's hundreds of videos online on my channel and like thousands online, where you'll see literally every Christian has his own understanding of the Trinity, of the Bible, of the divinity, all of that. Reason being is there is nothing that you can come back to that clarifies the text for you and the understanding of it. Now, the last question I want to ask you is this.
Sure.
Because you said something important. You said you don't have a problem kind of admitting a sense of divinity to Islam or something like that. What's your position?
Well, that God's providence is working through.
Yeah. I don't want to misquote you. So I'm going to ask you the question. Is your position on Prophet Muhammad that he was a prophet and a messenger from God or not?
I would say I don't know, but I do think he was. I think the idea, I think Islam has a lot of things. I do think there is a lot of objective evidence, I would call it, that Islamic cultures have done a great job of preserving certain things that we in the West or Christians have not been able to preserve. So I have a lot of respect for that. I also know that Muslims agree in many ways. The virgin birth, honoring Our Lady, Jesus as a prophet. So I would say that's obviously not going to be a problem for me as a Catholic. Where that ends up going, I do think that as a Catholic, we believe so. But this is like my authorities, right? That the Bible was the full revelation, so that the idea of another book, whether it's the Quran, the Book of Mormon, or anything like that, is kind of that wouldn't fit in with that picture. But I'm a human being. That could be wrong. I just don't see much evidence for it. You know what I mean? So, I don't know what God's doing with Islam, but I like a lot of it, and I think he likes a lot of it. Does that mean that Islam is true? I don't think so. But so I would be agnostic, I think.
Okay. So the problem with that is that you need to know. That would be similar to a Jewish person. When Jesus came, I do not know. He says a lot of interesting things. I do not know if it fits with my understanding of Judaism and Moses. I don't even know how to think. You would say that guy's going to hellfire unless he believes in Jesus. It's simple.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't believe that. But okay, you can say that, yeah.
Salvation, Paul says there's no salvation except in the belief in the death and resurrection of Jesus or a belief in Jesus. I don't know if you accept that part of the Bible. Yeah, okay.
No.
So
well, not literally.
okay. I mean,
Not literally.
okay, at this point, I don't know what to do then. I'm sorry. Okay, so
Well, I believe
because
God
for
can
me,
save someone through Jesus Christ in a non-explicit way.
Yeah, okay,
I
this is
don't.
the
I don't
difference.
believe
Okay,
all
this is the
Native
difference.
Americans are burning in hell.
Sure.
Do
This
you?
is the difference between a Christian. This is the difference between a Muslim and a Christian. If you bring a Muslim a verse of the Quran, he's not going to say I disagree with it because he doesn't have room to disagree with God's words. You submit to God's words because it's God's words and it's preserved.
I like that. I like the submission thing. Yeah.
Yeah, if a Muslim says that, he's automatically a disbeliever in our faith. So my point is very simple. You need to know.
I wouldn't claim to be a Muslim. I don't think I've tried to claim to be a Muslim.
I know. No. Yeah. I'm saying if a Muslim says that about the Quran. But anyways, what I'm trying to say.
I see. You're saying I'm not submitting.
Yeah. Yes.
I think I'm interpreting, but
no worries. I'm saying you need to know because God warns you that when He sends you a messenger, you're supposed to follow them. When He says in Deuteronomy, for example, that if a prophet speaks something and it happens, then it's the word that the Lord has spoken. So it's God speaking. If a true prophet says something, it's God speaking to you. So if you're like, okay, God says follow Prophet Muhammad, but you know what? I'm not going to investigate it. You say I haven't seen evidence. You haven't researched the evidence. I'm going to say respectfully. If you've researched, you need to actually research, do investigation. I have a video on my channel. It's called Compelling Evidence for the Truthfulness of Islam.
I'll take a look at that. I will.
Yeah. So look at the evidences. Don't knock it until you try, as you guys say.
Yeah. So right. Fair.
Yeah. Have actually a look because it matters. Because if you die today, and it's truly what God said, and God said you'll be punished, then my subjective opinion doesn't change it. If God said if I die as a disbeliever, then I'm gonna be punished. Then I'm gonna be punished. If He says if I die as a believer, I'm gonna be rewarded. Then I'm gonna be rewarded.
Can I ask you a question? I'm not saying is because there was a Catholic.
Speak the last one, if that's okay.
Sure. If you don't mind, you just give me yes or no. If I say I'm going to take a look at that, but I don't have time, but then I die, so you're saying that's eternal hellfire, even if I intend to take a look at it.
The person who goes to hellfire is the person who have come across the evidences of Islam being the truth. So the criteria is you hear the message, you would know it's the truth because deep within your heart you would know that
right. Okay.
And then you
that's the same as the Catholic.
Okay, you reject it, you die upon rejection, then you go to hellfire. That is our criteria.
I got you. Okay. I'll let you go. Thank you very much for your time.
No worries. There are a few people I need to talk with in the backstage as well. So
of course.
I appreciate your discussion. I hope I didn't say anything disrespectful. That wasn't the intention. And
no, absolutely. You're great.
The lovely discussion. All right, bye-bye. See you, Ben.
يا قلوبا فيها الوفاء بشركم اليوم